always reporting that what you love can
Click on the notification bell so that you'll get updates for our new videos. For anything else, we would like to thank our subscribers and viewers who are always there for our channel and who are always requesting amazing videos for us to make a reaction. So you guys are really very much appreciated. So hope we give you cool and amazing reaction videos. And also for this video, we are going to do our best in order for us to give you your requested video reaction.
Absolutely. So this video reaction is all about
The Fallin of World War II.
Yes. Now let's get started to watch the video.
Yes.
The average lifespan of an American is 80 years.
Oh.
And an 80-year-old today was 10
88 years
when World
old.
War II ended, 4 when it began.
That's the time of 1940,
A soldier who saw battle
No,
would
today,
have to be
but
in his
before
late
it's only
80s, at
10.
least today.
Oh.
Generals, political leaders, the decision makers of the war, you are still with us. And over the past few decades, we've seen authors and filmmakers rush to capture stories from survivors before this connection of memory is lost. This project is not about individual war stories, and it's not about survivors. We're going to tally up the tens of millions of people whose lives were cut short by the war,
What?
and see how these numbers stack up to other wars in history, including trends in recent conflicts. We'll be counting soldiers and civilians separately.
Oh,
Each of these figures
1,000
represents
civilians
1,000
killed.
people who died.
Yes.
Oh,
Civilians were of all walks of life,
it's very sad, right?
Yes.
whereas military
That
deaths
is what
were almost
worries.
entirely men. The average age was about 23. In most battles, for every 1,000 soldiers killed, there are more than 1,000 who are injured. The word casualty can be confusing, because in military speak, it often includes both deaths and injuries, and anything else that takes a soldier out of service. Here, we're just counting the deaths, and it will begin with American soldiers.
Americans.
Over 400,000 died. Most of the deaths occurred in the European theater, fighting the Nazis. And about a quarter were in the Pacific, fighting the Japanese.
Yes. It's very hard.
When you put them on the timeline, you see that casualties were the heaviest at the end of it. The war began on September 1st, 1939. But the U.S. wasn't going to join the fight until Pearl Harbor, 2 years in. The deaths increased drastically on D-Day, when the Allies invaded Normandy. One of the most tragic moments of the war was on D-Day at Omaha, where 2,500 Americans died.
Yes, that's very sad.
It's very sad, yes.
When Japanese
So about the same number of
bombed,
U.S. soldiers died
Pearl
on this
Harbor.
single beach like that as the entire 13 years of the recent war in Afghanistan. The bloodiest battle in the Pacific was Okinawa, which lasted 82 days, during which 12,500 Americans died. About 5,000 of these deaths were at sea from kamikaze attacks. Now let's look at some other countries, starting with Europe. Germany started World War II when it invaded Poland. Poland ultimately lost 200,000 soldiers in the war. Most died after the invasion while the country was occupied by Germany and the Soviet Union. Germany, meanwhile, lost just 16,000 in the invasion of Poland. The Nazis went on to invade and conquer other countries, including Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, Greece, and Yugoslavia. France surrendered, but after losing 92,000 soldiers in the Battle of France. Over 200,000 ultimately fell, which includes deaths in POW camps, French colonies, and other places. Yugoslavia suffered almost 500,000 military deaths. The initial invasion brought relatively few casualties on both sides, but the deaths mounted under Nazi occupation due to guerrilla fighting, civil conflict, and mass executions.
Oh,
That's drastic.
The Nazi invasions were swift, with relatively few German losses. Even Nazi commanders expressed surprise at their success. And then we have the United Kingdom and the United States, who were not invaded but took the fight to the Nazis. Britain lost about the same number of soldiers as the US, which includes the British colonists. Germany lost about 500,000 soldiers fighting the US and Britain, in what is known as the Western Front, which took place in France and Belgium. But most Nazi soldiers died in the Eastern Front. Germany's unsuccessful invasion of the Soviet Union. Numbers are staggering. The most famous battle of the Eastern Front, and perhaps the turning point of European war, was Stalingrad. The German Sixth Army successfully took Stalingrad, but then got surrounded by the Soviets and cut off from food and ammunition. 500,000 Nazis would ultimately die in Stalingrad. Another 100,000 were taken prisoner, of which 6,000 were ever returned. POWs had a low survival rate throughout World War II, and it was particularly good in the East. When you include these POWs, roughly the same number of Germans died in Stalingrad as all the Western Front fighting against France, the UK, and the US.
it's to be said, right?
Yes.
And though Stalingrad was a victory for the Soviets, they suffered almost twice as many losses as Germany. The Soviet Union would eventually defeat the once unstoppable German army, killing 2.3 million Nazi soldiers. But winning the war came at a cost.
Imagine how many lives lost when Germany started the war, right?
Yes.
There's no winner for that, even though they won the war. But look at how many, how many
Yes.
lives lost.
How many lives lost during the World War II and World War I, right? Look at that.
It's so sad. There's so many lives lost.
8.7 million is the official tally by the Russian military. Hotly disputed number.
That was only in Russia.
Some studies have calculated as many as 14 million. To complete the count of European military deaths, you need to add German deaths from other fronts, including the North and Africa, as well as deaths from other Axis powers allied with the Nazis, Hungary, Romania, and Italy. When you put these European military deaths on the timeline, it looks like this. You can now interact with the chart to learn more. Pause the narration if you would like more time.
It's to be result, right?
Yes. This is
And now we
first
switch
time
to civilian
watch
deaths.
this kind of numbers.
Six million Jewish people were killed in the Holocaust. If you separate this by country, you see that about half, 2.7 million, were Polish. 700,000 were Soviets, followed by Hungary and 17 other countries. Broken down another way, about half of the 6 million were killed in the concentration camps. Over 1 million died in Auschwitz. Most were killed in the gas chambers. Others died from starvation, exhaustion, disease, and other forms of disease.
Starvation.
It's to be sad.
Very scary as
The
well.
second most deadly camp was Fallin, which was exclusively an extermination camp, set up to look like a train station. Mobile killing groups killed 1.4 million Jews. Like with the gas chambers, men were killed first to reduce the risk of rebirth.
You can't imagine how about the children, right?
Yes. This is very sad story, right?
Yes. But this is the truth.
Yes.
This is what happens before.
The Holocaust also includes non-Jewish deaths. Between 130,000 to 500,000 Roma, then called Gypsies, were killed. The numbers are disputed. About 250,000 people with disabilities were killed. Homosexuals, Catholics, and other groups were also exterminated, but their numbers are relatively small. Some historians say that other civilian deaths should go under the label of Holocaust. About 2 million non-Jewish Poles were killed under German occupation. Some of which were sent to the gas chambers at Auschwitz. When you combine civilian and military deaths, over 16% of the total Polish population died in World War II, which is the highest percentage of any country. But not the highest in total death count. The Soviet Union again tops that list, losing at least as many civilians as it did soldiers, somewhere between 10 and 20 million. A particularly dark moment for the Soviet Union was the siege of Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. German forces surrounded Leningrad to force civilians to be evacuated. Supplies, including food, cut off for 2.5 years.
It's too very sad.
1.5 million people died as a result, mostly from starvation, mostly civilians.
That's an actual picture.
Yes.
Stalin's
People
own people,
starving.
his own people,
Yes.
is partly responsible for these numbers. He often didn't allow civilians to evacuate from
Yes.
cities, thinking it would cause the soldiers to protect them quite harder.
There's always no
About 1 million Soviets died in Stalin's own labor camps called the Gulag. Just about every country suffered civilian losses, especially countries who were invaded. While many died as a result of so-called collateral damage, the biggest numbers occurred when there was no accident. Civilians were exterminated, purposely fired from bombs, used as human shields, or intentionally deprived of
Yes.
That is the most drastic one.
The intentional killing of civilians was done by most warring parties, including the United Kingdom and the United States. The United Kingdom was spared of a land invasion, but still lost 60,000 civilians, largely from German air raids or blitzkrieg, often directed at civilian population centers. The UK did the same to German cities at a much greater magnitude, causing about 10 times the number of deaths. But most German civilian deaths came from the ground at the late stage of the war. When the Nazi regime collapsed, civilians living in occupied regions had to desperately flee from the advancing Soviet army. Rapes were widespread, and death estimates ranged from 600,000 to 3 million. Let's step back and see where we are with the figures. We just counted about 20 million civilian deaths in Europe. If you add this to the European military deaths we already covered, it brings us to over 40 million. Then we have the Asian figure. Here we see the vast majority of military deaths in Asia came from China and Japan. On the civilian side, about 6 million deaths from China, Indonesia, Korea, Indochina, and the Philippines can be attributed to Japanese war crimes, which are sometimes considered the Nazi atrocities due to the sheer scale of the cruelty. China had the second highest death count after the Soviet Union. And like the Soviets, the Chinese government demonstrated a stunning willingness to sacrifice its own people. Chinese nationalists opened the dike at the Yellow River, hoping the flood would halt the Japanese advance. 500,000 Chinese civilians or more were killed, which is 2 or 3 times the number who died in all countries in the 2004 Asian tsunamis. But the invasion of China only cost Japan 200,000 soldiers.
Oh,
Most were killed fighting the U.S. and allies in the Pacific War. A significant portion of Japanese civilian deaths were caused by American firebombing and the 2 nuclear attacks. Contrary to official U.S. statements, these airstrikes were directed at civilian populations,
That's
not
the-
military targets.
Hiroshima bomb, right?
And it's not
When you add all the deaths outside of Europe, it brings us to a grand total of 70 million for the war, give or take depending on who's counting and what civilian deaths get included.
70 million.
More people died in World War II than in any other war in history.
Oh.
For comparison, here are 20 or so of the very worst wars and atrocities we have on record. Some of these are more of atrocities than wars, but we've seen how that distinction can get blurred. Some of these span across centuries. World War II had the highest body count, and it all happened in just 6 years.
6 years.
The world's population has grown significantly since the earliest atrocities on this list. If you want to compare them in terms of what percentage of the world died, we can adjust the chart to look like this. This rough approximation tells us there may have been more devastating wars before World War II, proportionally speaking.
So many civilians did, right? During
Yes.
that World War II.
That's right.
It's very sad.
When you turn to post-war conflicts, it's hard to say anything that isn't controversial. But the data shows something quite extraordinary has been happening. In 1989, John Gaddis coined the phrase "the long peace" to identify the absence of conflict within the nuclear power during the Cold War. 25 years later, the Cold War is over, and the term is still being used, although its meaning may have shifted. European countries have not fought each other, except for this 10-day war in 1956 when the Soviet Union invaded Hungary. When we look at European wars before World War II, it looks like this. They tend to be more frequent as we go back, though smaller in scale. And the largest 44 economies of the world have not battled each other since World War II. Rich countries have fought poor countries, like the US versus Iraq, but rich countries have not fought other rich countries. Such a period of peace between the so-called great powers hasn't been seen since the Roman Empire. To many, peace is too strong of a word. Wars have occurred since World War II, and they can be grouped into these four categories. We don't see colonial wars anymore. We've already noted that interstate wars between rich countries have not occurred at all. And here we see wars involving smaller economies that tapered off. That leaves civil wars of two types, with and without foreign intervention. And this is what these battle deaths look like alongside of World War II. More people died fighting in World War II
Yes.
than in all the wars since.
It was very intense.
And again, we can't forget about world population, which has almost tripled since World War II. If we scale these numbers to show deaths in proportion to world population, showing the likelihood that a person on Earth dies in battle, the downward trend becomes even more pronounced. Now, this isn't to infer anything about why this trend is occurring. That's a discussion for another day. You can now interact with this chart to explore what conflicts are behind the totals. Now, bear in mind, we're just looking at battle deaths here, not civilian deaths, but those too are in decline. Peace is a difficult thing to measure.
Yes.
It's a bit like counting the people who didn't die in wars that never happened. We give such importance to the word peace, but we don't tend to notice it when it occurs, or report on it. Sometimes it takes reminding ourselves of how terrible war once was to see the peace that has been growing around us. Of course, this trend may not continue, and it's not clear how looking at these charts can help us make the right decisions to ensure that it does. But the longer the long peace grows, the more significant it becomes. So if watching the news doesn't make us feel hopeful about where things are heading, watching the numbers might.
That's right. What a great message, right?
Yes. Very sad story during the World War II, right?
I like how the narration or the narrator, that's Neil.
Yes.
What's the last name? I didn't get that. And
If you'd like to support this project and encourage new episodes, please follow us using one of the options below. And consider paying the suggested ticket price for today's show. Thank you very much.
Yes. So that's it.
That's it. This video is very educational, right?
Yes.
So it's also very interesting to watch this kind of video. So today that millennials needs to be aware of what our heroes during World War II did and all of those lives who lost during
Yes.
World War II. So it's very drastic, and I would also like this to be included on the list. So I also like this kind of video and to be shared of other Filipinos, right?
Right. It's very sad that so many casualties died during the World War II. I hope we share our love and kindness, share the love and everything that we have. Let's peace all together. Please stop the war.
Yes.
Because war is nothing.
That's right. Who would like war, right? Who would like
Yes.
making soldiers and civilians lose their lives? So
Yes.
there's no one who likes that. So this video also makes us realize the sacrifices that our beloved soldiers
Absolutely.
had before, right? So not just in one certain country, but also around the world.
Yes.
So not in just in the Philippines, not in Russia,
Yes.
not in Germany or in
In
UK,
India and
but
all over the world.
yeah, all over the world. So that's it. Hope you like our video reaction. Please don't forget to leave your comments and suggestions below.
Hope to see you guys. Sticker in the